Hello and welcome to the 14th episode of the Fireside Chat. Today we are talking about how to get more STEM people into the Gridcoin community and kind of marketing in general. The Fireside Chat is a get-together of Gridcoin community members and anyone from anywhere who wants to join and talk about anything Gridcoin related. Sometimes we have blockchain-specific conversations, cryptocurrency, anything decentralized you want to talk about, bring it in. Let us know, and we will try to get it on the schedule. And us are our friendly moderators. Myself, Jay Ringo, Goblin Popper down below. Say hi, Goblin.
Hello.
I'm from the corner. The one, the only, the I like chocolate.
Hey, I like chocolate.
Don't we all? I don't believe him.
I don't believe him either. There's something about it. When you put it in your name, it just feels like you're compensating for the opposite.
It's the core of my identity. You.
This is a family-friendly show, so let's bleep that out.
Oh, man,
do we have the train sound yet?
No, I don't know where it is. I really don't. I think it exploded or died. I think it died.
It will be coming in later. So yeah, let us know if you want us to cover a topic about Gridcoin or anything, and we'll do our best to get it into the schedule. Other than that, we host this every Thursday, 8 p.m. Eastern. What is that? UTC 7? Midnight, wow. 8 p.m. Eastern, midnight UTC. Here on the Gridcoin Discord server. Yeah, so let's just get into it. Before we get into the topic for today, I'll go over the news really quick. There's not much this week. There was a new State of the Network report. It comes out every other Monday. I will put a link in the description below. Please check it out if you want to see what's going on in the Gridcoin community. We put community posts in there. We put news, development updates, links to other threads. We don't put the whole thing in there itself. And we put a lot of statistics regarding our Boink team and the blockchain itself, so staking difficulty over time. A lot of really good stuff if you want to see what Gridcoin is doing as stats or community. And also an update on the UI poll that is underway right now. Max has released a few more images, a few more examples. He's taking feedback on the GitHub thread. So if you have any suggestions or questions, you can post them on the Reddit thread, the Steemit thread or whatever, and we will forward them if you don't have a GitHub account. But if you want to get it directly in front of Max's eyes, just post it right on the GitHub thread, and that link can be found in the proposal itself. I love what it's turning into personally, but you know, you don't need to love it. You can vote against the proposal yourself if you would like, but do vote. Voting ends August 1st. Vote by then. Does anyone else have anything else they want to talk about? Gridcoin, blockchain news?
Yeah, so Bitcoin hasn't been doing that great last couple weeks. Yeah, come at me. It's under $6,000. And right now, as of conversation, it's currently at 5,884. That's what people are buying it for. And anyway, so because of the inconsistency with it, the major issues that I think are kind of starting to happen is since it's dropping in price so fast, a lot of places are starting to remove it as a payment option. So you have a lot of places like Expedia and a bunch of other booking sites for like travel and hotels, literally just removing the option entirely. So we're kind of seeing a reversal of some of the acceptance of it, mainly because a lot of companies don't want to get stuck with this crypto, have to deal with a multi-day turnaround time, and within the 2 or 3 days that they get it and then, you know, swap it in for cash, it's down like 8%. So I think most of these features probably aren't being removed so much as just kind of like commented out in the meantime. But yeah, so that's probably not going to help the price. And again, I'll give you my home address. You can come out.
I will take you up at that. Can we get Hulk gloves? Can we fight with Hulk gloves?
We can. Barton, I'm going to need your home address.
Why is Barton coming in?
Unrelated.
Okay. Just to change the subject, Barton, where do you live? Yeah, it is a very volatile market, and it's a very volatile conversation in here, huh? I guess. All right, now moving on. Anyone else have anything they want to talk about? All right, then we will move on to the topic for today. We're talking more about marketing and specifically about how we can get Gridcoin in front of and accepted by STEM people, science, technology, engineering, and math. So, we are, as a cryptocurrency community from 2013, we are already, a lot of us are computer nerds, blockchain nerds, or just people who are techies, right? First of all, we're the people who are willing and able to sit down with Gridcoin and Boink and get it all set up, right? And go through that process, which if you've done that, good for you. We're making it as simple as possible moving forward, getting better documentation, but admittedly, it's not the easiest thing right now. So we want to, I think, try and get this in front of more people, a wider audience, people who aren't necessarily computer, blockchain, techie people, who don't really pay attention to cryptocurrency necessarily. And we have a unique ability to do this because of our connection to Boink, because of our connection to science. We have an onboarding process that is different than just, buy into the network and then hopefully the price goes up. We have a participation aspect. Come in and join us, have some fun. And especially if you're a STEM person, look at what we're doing with all these science communities. And if you're a data heavy person, we can actually help you crunch your data. So I think there are a few ways to go about this, but before I go too long on this ramble, just what do you guys think about getting Gridcoin in front of that STEM audience, how we could do it, if we even should, and whatnot?
That kind of goes back to that thing I was supposed to write up like 4 months ago, microgrid.
Yeah, how's that going?
I added another 10 words to the proposal.
Well, that's not bad, dude.
It's turning into your white paper, which is it'll get done during winter. Not sure which winter, but it'll get done by then.
Awesome. Winter's the time to release this stuff. But what do you mean by that? Sorry, I'm jabbing you too hard.
No, it's fine. Yeah. So for anyone who doesn't remember, because these things are episodic and some people come in and out. Microgrid, in a very brief overview, microgrid is the concept of pretty much making a community-run or sponsored Boink server, so that small-time researchers can push all of their data and such to it, and then it would be a white-labeled project a whitelisted project that would be a giant pile of various work units from small-time scientific researchers. So it would have the one major downside would be it would be in and out of the gray list and white list frequently, based on a variety of things. But it opens up the possibility to process small-time researchers and not have them worry about getting approved by Boink or having a generally whitelisted project in general, and have to fight through all those other processes. So we as a community can accept them in without needing to go through anyone else. But we would just use Boink as our backend. So I don't know. I think that would be a big help to kind of go out to places like colleges and maybe even some large hobbyists who just have tons and tons of data and are like, wow, pressing the process button on this says it's going to take 13 days. Maybe I can get an answer back in like an hour from, Gridcoin kind of thing. So.
Yeah, I love that idea. We had a whole episode on it, like you were saying. If anyone wants to listen to that idea in more detail, it's episode 4-ish. It's called Microgrid. And I really do like that idea. I think it would be a great way to, again, just like you said, get smaller university participants or casual researchers into the community and just grow ourselves in that way. Like, look, we can help these people. The way they would see it is like, I'm going to go to Gridcoin to get my data crunched versus I'm going to go rent a supercomputer or I'm going to go to university. Universities could come to us and we can use microgrid to build a lot more in the ecosystem. We can build it up. I think there's a lot of other benefits to microgrid than just that, which is not a just.
Yeah, I think what happens a lot, I'm not really in the scientific community world. I sell processing, right? But I only sell it to really corporations. And what I'd have to imagine happens is there's probably one of two scenarios. There's one where a school, I think Snips was talking about in his situation, where people will effectively book time on the school supercomputer, right? Where it's like you have to pretty much request processing cycles or CPU time. And it's not terrible, but obviously there's a line. And as long as you're okay with the schedule and knowing that you're going to be waiting in a line, it's not really that bad. And then the other side is probably taking advantage or abusing the free VMs you can get via Google Cloud. Because I know there's a number of people in Gridcoin who will do like cloud-based boinking and so on.
Yeah, and this would give them a nice third option. And if we can build an ecosystem, or I don't even know how to phrase it, the right word there, but if we can build a way where it benefits other aspects of science through our protocol, using the currency aspect of what we do and the ledger aspect of what we do, I think we would have a competitive edge over these alternatives that these researchers could go to. So it's like, all right, maybe this supercomputer can get you more speed, but A, there's probably a line for it compared to our line, and B, when you use us, you're also getting A, B, and C. There's more benefit to working with us than we're working with our competitor. So what do you think it would actually take besides, fleshing out the entire proposal and presenting to the community and getting feedback and going through that whole conversation process where we figure out if the community even at large wants this sort of thing built in the ecosystem? What do you think it would take if the community did like it ultimately? Because we would need someone or a group of people to set up and maintain that Boink project. And we would need people to go out and advertise that Boink project. And what else? That requires resources. It takes a lot of work to do something like that. We would need people to teach researchers how to format their data the right way, and a lot, right?
Yeah, but I think it also comes down to the alternative, right? It's, well, we have to teach scientists to format their data, but the alternative is they have to come up with a budget, and they need to hire other people to do it, and so on and so forth, right? This kind of almost goes towards the open source conversation we had how many months ago, where you can start arguing, well, it's open source and it's a free community, and what are you getting for free, right? You still have to do some of it yourself. It's not like we're taking it for charitable work, and we are, but it's not like we're going to do every single aspect of the heavy lifting, because we don't, we all have day jobs and other lives, and so we do like to spare our time, but they obviously do need to probably do some lifting, some figuring out of the technology. They might need to reformat their data or work with someone in the community who's willing to help them format their data. There's probably going to have to be someone else in the community that does and hosts and actually holds the Boink server, right? I know Technics was talking about doing something like that, or could. I know I have a spare Raspberry Pi, which is definitely not going to do anything, but that's about all I got. So we'd have to find someone in the community to actually host it and allow us to ping it and interact with it. And a lot of people have to donate their time, but it's never going to be perfect. It's never going to be 100%.
Yeah, to add on to that, I think the setting up of the microgrid, Boink project and server itself is not so much the difficult part. It's the getting the word out and, reaching out to these organizations to get them on board, because just having the project without, things to crunch doesn't really add much value.
Yeah, I think That's a good point too. It would be just like a startup in another world, different back end, but you have to get out there and let people know that this is an option they can now use if they want to.
I think a good number of people in the GRC community are either grad students, doctoral students, or college students. Obviously not all, but I think a good number. And I think using them to be like, hey, can you just go to your science department, or do you personally have data that professors have, right? Because once you get one of them to see that they can do it, I think then that really helps to kind of give it some momentum. The problem is it's like any company, right? It's like what was it? It's like any company where you still have to have your first customer. No, I hate IBM. Don't talk about
I
it.
was gonna say that too, John.
It kept coming to mind, but I was like, I'm not talking about IBM. It's like any company, right? You need to have your first customer to be able to say that you have experience in doing what you're doing. But at the very beginning, you're technically just advertising the fact that you could do it, and that first customer has to believe that you're not making it up, right? So with the microgrid, we pretty much have to get one or two people on board that are like, oh, okay, this is legit, and it's not just made up, and I'm not just handing people a ton of my data, right?
Yeah, I think it's like what Beachman just said in the chat. You need a pilot. You need a project that kind of says, here's how we're going to work. Here's showing that we do work, and, putting it out there that this is what, will happen if you put your project on microgrid. These are the results you can expect.
I'm going to be honest. I think if we had a pilot, I think a pilot project has every right to be something that's possibly already accomplished. And I mean that like for example with SNPs has a ton of this kind of processing, right? I forget what he does, but it's something with like geology, right? And he has tons and tons of data, and he's the one who has to always ask for the CPU time on the school's supercomputer. And what if we took something that's already completed that he kind of had specs around, like, oh, it took this long, and then we're like, hey, well, how long would it take on microgrid, right? It's a waste of energy, so I feel like some people in the community might be a little bit against it, and I understand that part of it. But at the same time, it gives you a point of reference of from start to finish, it took him 3 months. From start to finish, it took us, Yeah, there needs to be something. But actually, Beachman points out something actually really interesting as well, right? Instead of putting all this money, because people who have all this research and have to do all this processing usually get grants, and part of the money for those grants go towards the processing, right? Like internal billing or external billing of processing power, and they could effectively redirect that money as a donation or as something else, or put it towards something else in the research, and then use or use it to hire programmers to just help them do it, right?
So, two responses to that. They could do it with something like microgrid indirectly. I don't think any grant is going to let someone buy cryptocurrency and use it that way just yet. Maybe in the future, but they could do. They could work with their computer science department to build a BOINC Docker container for that university, for example, where you have the Cornell University Docker of BOINC, and all the data from Cornell gets put on the Cornell version, and then you have the Stanford Docker of BOINC, and then you have the Berkeley Docker of BOINC, and you have these universities who have built their own version of BOINC for their specific purposes, as open source does, and they do it with their CSC department. I think this is a great marketing opportunity. They do it with their CSC department and their science departments working together. So it's interdisciplinary, and they're doing exactly what you're saying. They are able to either get a undergrad to make a project out of it. Maybe they can do an entire course out of it, like programming for research, stuff like that. And I really think universities would love that sort of initiative, that sort of project. I think it can be tied to microgrid or something like that, but because we have an entire episode on microgrid, I don't want to spend this entire episode on it because I think there are other ways that we can reach out to the STEM community.
Yeah, no, I was actually going to say, that was actually going to be my next comment. It was like, but yeah, this is all fun, but there's got to be other ways, and I think thinking of other ways, or getting community comments on other ways is just as fun. Regarding any other questions on microgrid, because it can be a rabbit hole. If you have any other questions, all of the questions that I'm seeing asked are actually answered in the previous podcast, or we'll answer it after we're done with this episode. So.
Yeah, and to keep asking them, because microgrid, in the first episode, we say this is a very early idea. We are going to continue building it, and we'll probably have another episode in the future that goes into more detail on it. We don't
Whenever I finish that paper. But yeah, so Beachman and other people in the chat, but Beachman said he kind of does a little bit of work in this kind of area at universities and such. So I guess the question is, do you have any recommendations, or does anyone else who works as undergrad or in STEM have any recommendations for what would encourage more people to get involved in this community or get involved in Gridcoin in general?
Just one distinction I wanted to make, which was that I think you kept on saying how to bring in people with data so the data can be crunched. It's not just data to be crunched. It's also data to be created as well. So I think there's a few BOINC projects that actually run simulations, right? So the climate, so the climate stuff, they have data from which they're simulating, but I mean, I don't know in depth about the Large Hadron Collider stuff, but I imagine that some of that is just pure simulation. There's probably some Monte Carlo stuff going on in some places. So there's also room for creating data which can then be mined or have machine learning algorithms applied to it. And so that can bring in, more people as well. But I think the barrier to entry, thank you, Barton. So apparently the Large Hadron Collider, they're all simulations. So another possibility, I think the biggest barrier to entry that we have right now is it's not on an individual basis that we're lacking STEM people. So, as far as I'm aware, in terms of how many people here have let's say a paper published, I think it was me, Snip, and there's probably like a handful of other people in the entire community. And this is a STEM-based community. And so the question is, it almost seems to me that the way to reach all of the other stuff like the microgrid and all that other stuff is to, on an individual basis, bring people in here, and then we're gonna find that one person who has that one really, really good idea, and it's and then that gets the word out. And because so the first barrier to entry is bringing in people in on an individual basis, and then the second barrier to entry is actually having a successful project, either funded or promoted by the Gridcoin community, that spreads the word, or rather, really is a proof of concept, right? So we need a proof of concept in terms of making projects work. Yeah, Juringo, we're going to say something.
Yeah, I wanted to follow that. You pointed out two things: getting Gridcoin in front of the eyes of people who would be interested in this, so like STEM people, whether they're researchers or not. If you are a molecular biologist and you don't use data, you do experiments, you were likely at school or working with someone who does use data. So we still want to get it in front of the molecular biologist who doesn't simulate, because then they can get it in front of the other person that you brought up, which is someone who can help bring in the proof of concept, which is what we're sort of talking about. So to your first point, though, Chocolate, this is something I've been thinking about. We don't need to target the data people, as you were saying. We can, for example, the approval rating of scientists in general is 40% right now in it's like national polls. 40% of people trust and believe in scientists and science. Like, that's pretty bad. So there's a fairly decently sized push in science literacy and getting the word out about science, getting science out of its academic bubble and in front of the eyes of everyday people who just aren't exposed to it in the way that people in the field are, so that people will trust scientists and science, and maybe scientists and science won't be so bubbly. So what if we sort of tried to do that? If we found initiatives at universities that are doing that, because they exist all over the place, where they're trying to get their PhD students out into what they call elevator pitch conversations. And they're just little organizations at universities that just do that, get their PhD students into the town, and they try to talk to everyday people. And if they had funding, if we as a group, as the Gridcoin network, went to them and said, here's like $1,000 to get you into this event where you can go do your elevator pitch, they are now an organization sponsored by Gridcoin, which gets us in front of them and everyone else at that conference, so to speak. Yeah, like the Gridcoin group, LLC. But for example, because that wasn't the best description, but for example, and forgive me for using Ripple as an example, but what they have done, because they're very, they're banking and marketing oriented, but what they did is they went on like Ellen. They did that thing where they bought all the school supplies on some website where teachers put up a wish list of supplies. Ripple went in, went in with I think it was a lot of money, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars, and bought all those supplies. And all of a sudden, Ripple's name is in front of all these educators, all these politicians, and it's more likely that Ripple will become accepted than not. So if we did sort of the same concept, except with the science community, I think would be very well received. Was that a complete ramble, or did that make sense to someone?
No, that made
it to much
sense. I think there needs to be some kind of, right now, I think probably the main, and I mean, maybe I'm just horribly wrong on this, and I'm sure Barton will tell me if I am, but I think one of the main issues as to why we have either a small community or one of the biggest ways we could probably get in front of more individuals who are involved in STEM is probably just advertising ourselves more. I don't know if we have too much of an advertisement. I know we have an advertisement budget. I know it's very small, but I mean, I think the last time I checked, we had like 3 Twitter accounts, and I think like 2 of them are pretty old, and one of them barely ever posts. Yeah, we have 1 official, but there's like 6 that like exist if you type in Gridcoin. And I think just like, yeah, then as we mentioned before, just kind of going off what's going on in the chat, is it's kind of the pain of the decentralized world is it's really hard to have a quote official account, because that would mean that there's a board of people who are running it, which can't exist in a decentralized, or really is against the whole concept of decentralization, right? So it's the same thing with, why don't we have like t-shirts and buttons and stickers and posters, and it's like, well, there's no official group to technically sell it. So I think we have a little bit of a marketing issue, in that other than just word of mouth, there's no quote official channel to kind of push down that.
I have something to add on that note, because you say there's no official social media platforms, but in the white paper we all voted on and approved, we have a list of social media accounts, which, you know, by the nature of being in the white paper would imply that they are our official accounts. So, you know, it's kind of like a little bit of a contradiction there. I do agree with you that in a decentralized community, like, who's the board of directors on the social media, but it's there in the white paper. So
yeah, so I guess I'm not saying that's well. Last I checked, I didn't see that they were too kept up. Maybe I just looked at a really bad time of the week or something. But it was like that, and it was like, okay, so who technically runs them? Is that like, do like 10 people have access to the passwords? And
this is how open source communities generally work. It starts, there are a few people that start it, Rob and the early developers started it, and then there are people that join, and there are people who join early, there are people who join later, but there are people who contribute a lot. And as you contribute in an open source community, you gain respect and reputation and trust. And as you gain that, you become someone who is trusted enough to be given responsibilities to take on this sort of stuff. So that's what happens in Gridcoin, just like in Boink, and just like in every open source community that I know of. So when that's basically what has happened. There are people who run the Twitter. Quez and CM have final say over the Twitter. We use that Twitter as the official Twitter because it's the Twitter that has been around the longest, that's run by the people with the longest standing trust and reputation in the community and whatnot. That's why we have the Tumblr account, which is run by Rhino, which is that has been around for a while, and that's why that is our official Tumblr account. This is why we have all these different official, I'm making quote signs, accounts, because that's kind of how OS works. So as it grows, there are possibilities for other types of organizations to come up. And I apologize for going on this huge tangent, but so.
No, I think marketing is a very important aspect of how to get more people involved, right? STEM people aren't looking through Twitter for things to do like all day, but people noticing that we exist is important, right? The amount of times I've gone on LinkedIn, like part of my job is to do like general advertising and marketing for my company, like just post regularly on LinkedIn. And I look to share things, and some things I look to share blockchain related. And I've seen blockchain things where I actually just get annoyed, where I'll search through the whole thing to look to see if Gridcoin's involved. There will be a page with like 150 different ways that blockchain is being used in the cryptocurrency to look at for that use, and Gridcoin's never on it. And to me, that's always a shame. Because it's such a cool use case, and there's like 18 to 35 different things being advertised, like, oh, you want smart contracts? There you go, here's a bunch of smart contracts, but not one of them references something that Gridcoin does. And it's such an opportunity for them to be like, here's a completely new use case, instead of like 100 proof of stake ones and this one over here that does that weird thing that nobody cares about. I don't know. So I think it's very relevant.
The way we would move into marketing is, first I'll step back and use Bitcoin as an example. So Bitcoin came about and it was exactly the same as what you were just describing. There were 1,000 different websites that were like, this is Bitcoin, this is Bitcoin, this is Bitcoin. There was no trusted representation after Satoshi left on what Bitcoin was, how it was being developed, and all this stuff. Eventually, there became organizations, several different organizations that represent a different aspect of the Bitcoin community, and it became a decentralized open source entity in itself. It has its own network structure outside of the way the blockchain works. This is how its development is run. There are several organizations, Bitcoin Core, for example, that develop it in certain directions and go down different paths with different visions, and they all ultimately try to work together to advance Bitcoin as it stands, but also looking into different aspects of what they're interested in. So Gridcoin, the way that would work in Gridcoin is there needs to come about this a way to organize marketing initiatives that doesn't really exist right now. We have the foundation, which is something Bitcoin never had. Those people that organized Bitcoin had to use their own riches from the Bitcoin boom in 2013 to build these giant organizations, hire developers, and get it going. We have a good amount of Gridcoin minted every year just from staking on the foundation, just from interest. So we need to find a way, and we're trying to do this, to use that money for advertising, for marketing, to get it in front of the right people so that what Goblin just said doesn't exist. So question, I think, at this point is how do we use that in the right way? First of all, how do we do it? How do we get the community on board with getting money out of foundation into advertisement? Vortac was someone who did this before. We need to do that again. And then how do we use it? What do we use that money for? And I think the conversation we're having today is, do we want to use that money to get in front of STEM specific people instead of crypto specific people? Personally, I think yes, that is the audience we should try to go to. And this is why I brought it before. Maybe we should use some of that money to sponsor university programs, small university programs. Like, here's $10,000 to get you this research group out to, I don't know, Wisconsin to talk about something.
I'm gonna definitely back you up on that regarding supporting or trying to bring in STEM people as opposed to crypto people. The reason being, well, there's a couple of reasons. So the first is that in the crypto community, there's just an enormous amount of competition. And if you're not really like a hardcore STEM person, there's a lot of other really, really cool cryptos with really, really cool ideas out there that you can join. And so there's just simply too much competition in that realm. The second reason is that when we talk about scientists, undergraduates, graduate students, these are people who have dedicated their lives to Gridcoin, meaning that they are not necessarily they would not necessarily, or in fact very likely would not be joining primarily for profit, although they might be interested in it. And I mean, it's not like many professors or graduate students have a particularly high income, unless you're a professor, like a tenured professor at a really big university. We'd be bringing in, or trying to attract very dedicated, hardworking people. Even a few of those people working part-time can do an enormous amount of work and come up with ideas that no one else has come up with. I'm definitely on board with the, trying to attract STEM people as opposed to crypto people.
I will add that I agree, but I think for slightly different reasons. I don't necessarily think that there's too much competition in the crypto world, but I think that if you aim for just people who are looking for another crypto to get behind, we'll kind of become like one of those pump and dumps, and I feel like we'll go up in value pretty sharply, and then all of those people will kind of just jump ship once they made a little bit of money, right? Of course, some of them are going to stay behind, but when you have this people in the STEM, and I know Barton's going to type something like, "Oh, I'm not going to be too upset with that" or something.
It's just a picture.
It was just a picture of a boat, of course. Yeah, whatever. So it's but when you bring in people with like STEM, I feel like you're building a community. So yeah, I agree. I agree with chocolate, but I think for slightly different reason.
Well, basically, I just wanted to say, as far as my general take on marketing, we do have a lot of social media accounts and things like the Facebook page. I mean, if you guys aren't aware, there's in the Slack channel, we have a marketing channel all talking about this. But one of the recent news items for Facebook is that they are now allowing, once again, cryptocurrencies to be marketed on Facebook. So they're very selective, as far as I've read, about what they're taking on and why and blah, blah, blah. But I think that we have a good opportunity to get back onto that platform and do some marketing. So, but yeah, the other thing too I was going to mention, so aside from that, we can pursue is the fact that all our various social media channels are they're not being updated at the same frequency, and especially the Facebook, which I believe the last post was in April, actually, when the white paper got approved. That was the last post. So just we could improve in the realm of frequency on how much we post, but also I think on another note, we need to have some cohesion on the content that is being posted on all the platforms. So those are just my ideas.
Yeah, one thing I've noticed from doing this as like a small portion of like my daily job is posting once per day usually in early morning gets the most amount of traffic and is about all you really need to do. So effectively, if we have different people running each of those different accounts, I mean, you could post the exact same thing on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, Google Plus, whatever. I don't care what we use, but it's like you can post the same thing on all of those places, just one post a day. I feel like that's fairly doable, especially if you have multiple people coming up with said post, and they can literally just create a backlog of posts or post. It's once you get into like a routine of it, it's not really that bad. But yeah.
Have you ever worked SEO or social media before?
Yeah. SEO, not really. I've been trying to read up on it a little bit lately. Social media, again, has slowly been becoming part of my job because I work for a 10-person company.
Yeah, I asked because it's not as easy as you make it sound.
It's not as easy, but that's a really good place to start. I'm not saying that that's the answer, but just like posting like once a day is a very good place to start to just have your profile be consistently viewed and get some kind of attention.
Sort of, not exactly, but posting more often than we do would be good. There are several issues with it in the way we operate. And this is sort of stepping away from the STEM focus, but I hope to get back to the STEM focus after this little tangent. So there are questions when you post on Twitter, on a social media account in this organization. What is okay to post? That makes basically the big one. And finding stuff that's okay to post that everyone can agree on is very difficult. And then the second question is who posts it? Because if you have a system where every post has to be approved by a large group of people, you can't physically post every day because not everyone is on every day. So you either have to trust one or two people or a small group to make the right decision, which a lot of people in this community do not like that concept, or you can't post every day and you have to go through this sort of community run system where people realize it's actually fairly difficult to find good content and create good content that's phrased correctly and that follows SEO and it doesn't shine a negative light on anything we're trying to do. It's very difficult to do that. As you can see in the Twitter proposals channel, no one really contributes. It takes work and people don't get paid for this sort of work. So no one really spends a lot of time doing it. Yeah. So those are the two routes we can take. And it's just difficult to take that route, as right as I think both you and Anonymous are on.
Yeah, I mean, what I personally do, and I agree with you. And I think, again, the important thing to always remember whenever we say all of these are great ideas is very few people in the community are paid to work in the community, and the only people that are really paid are the people that are coding and contributing to the blockchain. People who are doing social media aren't really compensated unless it's like included in the budget, which I don't believe it is. But what I post is like I usually just repost or reshare or whatever, like infographics. Like I'll literally have like a backlog of infographics I found. They're just like, hey, check out this infographic. Next day, hey, check out this infographic, right? And it's not like the craziest, most interesting stuff, but it usually gets people to follow you and it usually gets more attention. And then when you do have an actual real content post, the algorithm, it favors you a little bit stronger than when you post once in like every other 5 months, right? Again, not the answer, that's just what I do. So it would be less about, because you're right, you can't be expected to have an entire community create consistent content to post once per day, and also make sure that whatever you're about to post is compliant, is not going to make us look bad, no slip ups, it's extremely big to ask of someone who doesn't even technically represent you, right? But I think I mean that's yeah. So I think like maybe once a week on that kind of stuff, maybe a couple days, or even if it was just like a bot that posted the stock price or the like GRC price or prices of other things, right?
As it stands, we do post at least once a week. It's usually twice a week.
Yeah.
And we try not to do price posts because we're a science company. We don't want people to think we're about price and money. But I think the idea of backlog graphics is great. Just personally, I'm
It's
not
not
going
the
to make it.
answer.
If someone else wants to make it, go for
No,
it.
again,
Post it in the
I'm-
Twitter proposals channel, and we can get it going. We can get that sort of backlog going, but people need to do the work. It's a lot.
Yeah, and I'm not the one creating it. This is like I find other creators who make it, and I just share what they have. Right? I'll just like bookmark their tweets and just share it like a week later. But anyway, yeah. But to kind of go back to STEM.
Yeah. To end that section, Robotic Mind does say maybe blank stats, and I think that is actually a pretty reasonable thing to say. Like, there's the stats for this project, left and right. But again, we've gone down this road before, and there were some people did not want to make it seem like we're favoring one project over another. So we'd have to be very careful to make sure we give equal airtime to each project, which again, it takes work to keep track of everything you have posted and who you haven't posted yet and how much you post them. It's work.
I'm
But
gonna be the world's worst parent, because so help me, if I have more than one child, I'm gonna definitely show favoritism. Like it's gonna be like, yeah, they're my favorite. Maybe you should do some more work, Jimmy.
I think you're allowed to do it when you're a parent, but not when you have a Twitter.
That's fair, yeah, because Twitter's more important than real life.
But yeah, so Twitter, as the chat has sort of been talking about, Twitter focuses on the crypto world right now, as we could use it to get in front of more STEM people, but a lot of STEM people don't focus that much on Twitter. I think there are other ways we could get in front of STEM people, like we were talking about microgrid, like maybe sponsoring some university programs, or asking people in the community with access to a university to go out there and just share Gridcoin with them. What else?
Ask pretty please to Neil deGrasse Tyson or not Bill Nye.
We could, I mean, this is the thing, if we sponsor large enough organizations or large enough university conferences, not conferences necessarily, but movements where they are, for example, they are science literacy people who try to take academic jib-jab and bring it to everyday people. So if we get into that movement, we might get on their radar, but we need to get into that sort of movement. We need to choose the movement we want to get into and fund it and help it.
I'm gonna be honest, I don't know why this thing is over an hour late.
Yeah, that's 9:16. What is this?
I don't know. It's train time. It's time to start. Bring the bear back. Too bad we didn't wait for. Oh wait, Snips is back. Oh good, okay. See, Snips was just waiting for the train.
Yeah. It called me here.
it took you here.
We could buy an out in Science or Nature. That's not a bad idea.
Yeah, I think there's very specific places to that we can advertise, right? Like if we go on there's really easy ways to waste money in advertising, and then there's a couple places that might have really good return. I think some scientific magazines might be awesome. I think, I mean, this is technically, I mean, it's not charitable, but it's technically open source and contributes to scientific research. So there's probably small crypto or small blockchain service or sales organizations that are probably willing to like help a small bit so that they can say they contribute to like the open source community. I'm not saying cost, I'm saying like contribute for like free. Like oh, I contributed like 5 hours, so now I can say I helped you guys, which is like I'm saying it's an idea, like allowing people in. Don't let IBM in though. Just don't do that one. But yeah.
So another approach to this is if we get, first of all, I would put this off until Gridcoin is a little bit more developed and solid. We've gotten through the GDPR thing and gotten the manual reward claim out. The few really big things that are on the roadmap right now, I think, should be taken care of before we go really heavily advertising. I think Jay Rango and I have discussed this in the past. But if we could have a project that really worked hand in hand with us and got statistics from, this is what distributed scientific computing can do for a research project, XYZ, I don't know, citizen science grid or something, right? And actually work with them. And if they write up an informal article and submit it to Science or Nature, not like as a full, they're almost like editorials. It's like the first half of Science magazine each week, are just articles about the developments in one field or another. And if they could submit something like that, highlighting BOINC, highlighting GRC, that would be excellent. And I think it would be better than any advertisement you could have or that you could buy.
I like that. I think the target would be, unlike an advertisement, which is targeting people who see the ad, this is targeting people who are going to be interested in what the article has to offer and would understand the undeveloped nature of what we are at this time. And they would see and be like, look at the potential here, and can I help it in some way, maybe?
And they would be interested in actually using it as a platform, right? Like this is getting at the community that actually cares about, distributed scientific computing, because they're the ones that are actually doing the projects. And most academics that I know read Science and/or Nature fairly regularly. I have a subscription to it. It's my bathroom reading, for God's sake,
Yeah, this is Jim. So do I. I read it. I have a subscription to Science. I've had it for 20 years. And my question to you guys is, in this area is, how much pressure is there for more distributed computing resources in terms of, what scientists need to get their compute work done? I mean, I would think that even with the supercomputers available, there's still a huge need for processing power. And, utilizing supercomputer resources is expensive at the end of the day. So, you would think that if more people really knew about the potential of what, computing, this style of distributed computing can offer, it would be really quite attractive for people that are trying to, get a lot of computing work done for whatever projects they have going on. So I like it. I like the idea of putting that in Science as an article.
Speaking from experience on that, I do a fair amount of scientific computing myself. I use many hundreds of thousands of hours on the local supercomputers at my university. And if you're at a big university, you do have access to this kind of thing. It's reasonably readily available, and it's generally not. It's generally paid for as like overhead cost for the university. In my case, it's paid for by the bit that's scraped off of the top of every grant that comes in. And it's free. You just need to submit a proposal and a request for service units, and then you have all year to use those service units. And then you have things like Blue Waters, where you submit a big proposal and hopefully get accepted, and then you get some big chunk of serious supercomputing time. But at the smaller schools, it can be challenging to get access to these kind of resources. And there's kind of two types of projects, I think, that would benefit from this. One would be smaller schools that don't have direct access to supercomputers, natively, and the second would be projects that are just so big that it's unreasonable to be doing them constantly on the available supercomputer that they have at their university.
Meaning it would take up all the resources, and so they can't really devote that much time to it.
Yeah. So there's a neutrino detector thing they've got down in Antarctica. When I was back at Penn State, where I did my undergrad, that project used a huge amount of computing resources. Like they were on the clusters. They would just suck everything up for like 2 weeks at the beginning of the month, and then everyone else could finally get in. It's kind of nuts. But like a project like that's just so big, but is able to be split into a bunch of little pieces, is perfect for distributed computing. So a group like that is the kind of group that I would expect would actually jump on Gridcoin, Boink, right, and benefit from Gridcoin.
Well, the good thing about most large scale distributed computing algorithms or problems is they in general are already set up to be highly parallel. They have to be.
Yes, they have to be.
A large scale supercomputer, while it has high speed interconnects between the nodes, they're extremely slow compared to the node speed. So the problems have to be able to be chopped up into parallel streams. Otherwise, you get no scalability out of it. So, the key is, of course, when you go to a work unit distributed model like you have at Boink, you're going from a slow but relatively, compared to Boink, high-speed interconnect to something that's really glacial in terms of downloading and uploading work units. And the work units have to be essentially completely independent. So there can be almost there just simply can't be dependencies between the work units at all. So the problem has to be completely divisible, right? It has to be literally completely parallelizable and completely divisible. But there are lots of good problems in science that can be chopped up that way, right? So, there's a large swath of great computing applications for this style of distributed computing. So it's quite interesting. Yeah.
I'm going to bring some stats into this. First, we talked a little bit earlier, I think before both of you were here, about the simulation field as well. That requires constant computing. There's a bunch of Boeing projects that do simulation, and that is only going to expand exponentially, especially with climate modeling and weather prediction. But statistically, with what's happening with cloud computing and data, these are just a couple bullet points here. By 2020, a minimum of 1/3 of all data will be stored and analyzed using cloud computing. Key influences to moving to a cloud include faster payback times of 30% and improved agility of also 30%. And Hadoop, for anyone who knows Hadoop, an open source tool for distributed computing. Hadoop.
So help me.
is expected to grow at a compound annual growth rate of 58%, meaning that it will be $1 billion by 2020. And storage is also going to be a big thing moving forward. So there is a demand, both I think what Snip was saying and what Jim was saying, and it's only going to increase, and it's going to become more distributed than centralized moving forward.
Yeah, and for anyone, as a side note, for anyone who doesn't know what Hadoop is, it's effectively, the simplest way to describe it is it's taking like small commodity hardware, like a bunch of like random, personal PCs, installing a certain software, Hadoop software on it that makes all of the PCs act as one giant supercomputer. So if there's 4 cores on one machine and 4 cores on another, the Hadoop software makes it seem like there's one computer with 8. Is kind of the easiest way to kind of describe it. It's the very low level, but the reason I say it is because I know of some colleges, like for example, I heard from someone who worked with Stony Brook, I believe it was, who has like 120 node Hadoop cluster, and I was like, what are they doing with that? And they're like, processing. Like it's 120 nodes, there's redundancy, it's failover, it's a cheaper way to get a supercomputer, and so I feel like that's another way that people are dealing with all of this stuff. But in order to use Hadoop, you need to have stuff that can be broken up into small work units. Otherwise, you're just sending all the work to one computer on the system.
That is really cool. I never knew about that.
You knew about which part?
Hadoop.
It's been coming around. It came out how many years ago? It really started picking up pace in like 2014. To be completely honest, to be completely honest, there were a few different distributions. Now it's narrowed down to like 3 realistic ones. It's open source technology. You can feel free to download it and do whatever you'd like with it. But the main hang up on it is there's a bunch of security things that get really, really complicated, like Cerberus or Kerberos or however you want to pronounce it. And there's like key authentication, and it can get very complicated and obnoxious, but it is actually a really cool system. I'm not so sure about the growth of it, and that's only because most organizations I speak to were really, really into the Hadoop space. That's all they wanted to hear in 2014, 2015. And if you ask them now, like in 2017, 2018, their response was, yeah, we kind of had something going, but it lost a lot of steam because nobody really figured out how to really get much use out of it. So I think it's still prevalent in places that have a lot of commodity hardware, like universities, but I don't know if it's going to grow to the extent that statistic said, mainly because that's probably counting companies as well, which in my opinion, I don't see using as much, because Hadoop was the counter to on-premise, and now a lot of people are going from on-premise to cloud. And so it's...
Right, that's what the stuff is for.
And the major cloud providers are using or have developed their own versions
cloud-based
of
Hadoop kind of stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
So the point I was getting at, though, is there is a huge demand for this, and it's going to increase pretty exponentially or close to exponentially in the coming years and decades, because we're just producing so much more data, and our society is continuously relying on the analyzation of that data.
Well, and we have no shortage of hard problems. I mean, at the end of the day, a lot of these simulation problems are by their very nature numerical. The protein folding, GPU grid kind of stuff. All those types of simulation and quasi-simulation algorithms are done that way because that's the only way to really grapple with the issues. You can't solve problems really analytically; they have to be done numerically. And so you're right. The demand for that's only going to grow over time because we've solved all the easy stuff already. You can do that on a piece of paper and a few equations. A lot of these problems are very difficult. So.
This guy over here with a paper and a pen. Jeez.
I don't know about solving all of it.
I solved all of it on a bar napkin.
I've been putting a lot of pen to paper the last couple of weeks, so I'm pretty tired.
Just messing with you, Joe.
Yeah.
But actually, to kind of loop it back actually to what Snip was saying, I think colleges would actually push people in STEM to actually take advantage of what we'd be offering, primarily because you can argue a ton of very noble reasons, but at the end of the day, I'm a little cynical. I usually think it comes down to cost at the end of the day, and it really, they don't have deteriorating hardware costs, and they wouldn't have cloud costs, and those two big things are huge marketing budgets, right? Because every time you need to replace a supercomputer, I've sold them to colleges before, right? I've sold UConn the supercomputer. That was like $700,000, right? And that's that thing's gonna last probably for 5 years before they replace it. Cloud costs can be, depending on how much they're using, tens of thousands a month, right? And it's doesn't go down, it actually goes up, right? So by saying, hey, do you want to use this free thing and pay for it only when you need to use it, and also you might not even need to pay for it, it's charitable, I think they would get pushed there by the school just by the sheer accounting of it.
And this is why, the big universities can afford these big systems, but smaller schools, branch campuses of state schools and stuff, they just don't have necessarily the same same resources. I guess branch campuses have access to the main campus's computing resources. That's a bad example. But other smaller schools generally don't have those resources. It is indeed very expensive. But you know, when it comes to projects, right, you really have to think inside the confines of what resources are available to you. I think making BOINC easily available to, or even like a microgrid kind of projects, something like that, easily available to researchers, will eventually gain quite a lot of interest, because it opens up such a nice avenue for getting these computing resources that are otherwise very difficult to get. But that's a slow process, and it's really the small guys that really need this. And the sad thing with that is that right now, without something like microgrid, you need to have a really big project in order to get on BOINC, get a bunch of people on there, and then get whitelisted on GRC. Which I think, going back to our microgrid thing, is a really strong case for something like microgrid.
Also, to Chocolate's point, couldn't we also say that one of the other ways to get STEM people here is to advertise our data? So we'll process the data for you, and then there's the other side of which is, hey, we have a ton of data that you can offer, like for the computer science majors and the computer science department who might want to do statistics or papers on hardware or processing. We can almost kind of offer that to help invite them to the community and get more people involved.
When you say data, do you mean results or?
Well, there's results. There's I think of I mean, it always kind of goes back to the same thing, which is like WooProp is a big one.
Yeah, you're talking about his idea about making a large ledger, essentially, of the GPUs and what they can do, and CPUs.
Yeah, and I mean, that's a really nice data set, which we can probably, that's another free advertising thing. Like there's data.world or dataworld.com or whatever it is, I forget, but like if you post it there and people go to it, we'll pretty much like, hi, we're Gridcoin. We pretty much constantly add to this data set. It's data.world. And it's like, we constantly add to this data set. Feel free to take what you want. People might use a ton of it, right? That's free advertising.
We should make it clear, though, right, that it's not GRC that's really facilitating all of this. It's BOINC, and GRC is rewarding it, hopefully pulling more people in that otherwise wouldn't be running BOINC and otherwise wouldn't perhaps be able to run BOINC economically.
Yeah, the wording would specifically.
It's a little touchy, right?
Yeah, the wording would have to be we're the Gridcoin team that collects the data from BOINC, from our user.
And if we had like an article if we worked with a project that's on BOINC and had an article in Science or Nature or whatever, then it would read something along the lines of this project done on BOINC. 50% of it was run by Gridcoin team, right? And that's kind of where we come in.
Yes, I agree. That concept of like this is almost like sponsored by Gridcoin. Like this research was sponsored by Gridcoin, ties into the idea I was talking about. Like, yeah, the Gridcoin Group LLC, Chocolate. The idea that we can sponsor stuff that's not necessarily research or data dependent, where we can help little smaller scientific communities at universities get funding to do stuff at their university or to do stuff at a conference or to do whatever. Let's get our name out in front of people as what we do or what we support. What we do is research, we help data analysis, and what we support is science. So let's advertise in those avenues with the money that we have in our foundation. I think we shouldn't be afraid to use it for this sort of stuff. I think we should always question what we're using it for and always be very diligent about where the money's going, but we have a lot of it. And I think spending 1,000 here to get 1,000 people in to the community or get it in front of 10,000 eyes is well worth the cost. But we are running towards the end of the clock here, so I'll leave some space here. Does anyone have any thoughts about what I just said, what Snip just said, what Galvin just said, or anything else they didn't get a chance to bring up yet during the show? So with that, with Jim's
I love
blinker
that.
going
I
on
love that
there.
we hear Jim's blinker.
So
Like that's the cutoff music. Just Jim's blinker.
Yeah, so this has been a conversation. We've come up with a couple good ideas about how to get Gridcoin in front of STEM, the STEM community more. If you are interested in taking a more active role, reach out in any of the social media platforms, specifically marketing on Slack. We do talk a lot about it, and this is definitely a field where we need help. Anyone can really step up and do it. If you want to ask for funding from the foundation, don't be afraid to put it out there, and don't be scared of people saying no. People could say no, but you don't know until you ask. And if it's a good idea that maybe just isn't ready yet, I'm sure you're going to find a lot of people willing to help you build it into something that is ready to get funding to see it built. So definitely come in and help. Other than that, we'll wrap it up for this week. Next week, who knows what we're doing? It might be an hour of silence. We were really into that today before we started the show, so we might just have to do it. But whatever it is, it will be Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern, midnight UTC on the Gridcoin Discord server. We'll see you then. Have a great weekend.